Right. We ended off last time in Revelation chapter 12, verse 12. So, like I said, we're already past halfway, and that's good news. This is the continuation of our series on Revelation, and I titled this Revelation of Liberation. Um, and also, I expect things from you. First is your pen and paper, as usual. Second is your expectation. Don't expect that I'll be re echoing or just be parroting the previous presentations on Revelation. This is my own take on the book. So, this is just part of your options how to interpret this prophetic book. However, I'd like to point out, which is the third, is to expect that this will be fully Christocentric, rigidly, strictly Christocentric. What do I mean by that? That we begin with Jesus Christ and end with Him and everything in between. If you're expecting here for me to discuss current events, what's happening in Eastern Europe, or what's got to do with these events with Rome or papacy or the states, or I'm not that kind of expositor. I just fully focus on what the text is saying based on the Old Testament, because I believe this is my premise, and this is arguable, of course, that the revelation is highly informed by the Hebrew manuscript. That's why, for the original audience of John, that Jesus Christ is the revelator revealing to John about Jesus Christ himself and his plan for his church. Therefore, the immediate audience there in Asia Minor, southwest Turkey, are also informed of the imageries. It's just us that are, we can't make sense of it in our own context, in our own setting. But for them, they know what John is talking about when he mentions about the 144,000, about the mark of the beast, about the dragon. Why do they know it? Simply because it's all in the Old Testament. And if we won't do that, we will be lost. We will be diverted, and we'll go all their own directions. So I want to avoid that. Strictly speaking, I want to be purely, this study to be purely expository and having proper hermeneutics, as we've been doing for the last, how many sessions already? I think more than 10. Okay. So last time, we read this. Rejoice then, you heavens, and those who dwell in them, but who to the earth and the sea? For the devil has come down to you with great wrath, because he knows that the time is short. It's actually as a result of the rebuke of the Lord himself, Jesus Christ, which I alluded to last time in Zechariah 3:1-2. So write this down. If ever you'll be missing the text or the references, you might as well watch this on YouTube. Time is short. His time is running out because he's been judged already. And we know that when Jesus Christ comes, he comes as the Lord of Lords, King of Kings, as the ultimate judge, because judgment has been given to him by the Father. So let's now go to 13 and chapter 12. So when the dragon saw that he'd been thrown down to the earth, again, for those who just joined us and was absent last time, the dragon is no other than Satan. We can see that in Revelation 20. He pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. as a recap, the woman here could pertain primarily to Israel as we follow the motif in the whole chapter 12. But you can also say that this particularly pertains to Mary, the mother of Jesus, because the male child here is no other than Jesus Christ. So was given 2 wings of the eagle. Okay, so the 2 wings can be found in Isaiah 40:31. Okay, and when you connect this to Revelation 13:10, we can see the parallelism there, that the first wing, there's no order actually. I'm just saying that one of the wings pertains to faith, and the other wing pertains to patience. So these are all figures of speech because I take the whole book of Revelation metaphorically. If I take one as literal, then how would I know which one is literal and which one is symbolic? Otherwise, I'll just be cherry picking, and perhaps I'll mislead you in the end, and which I don't want to do that. So faith could be strength. That's one wing, and then endurance or patience could pertain to endurance. There you go. That's my interpretation of the 2 wings. Given to the woman, then second, it pertains to Israel, and for us, the spiritual Israel, because we're Gentiles to begin with. We've just been grafted in, as in we can see in Romans 11, because I'm doing series on Romans as well with Brother Ivan. So that she could fly from the serpent into the wilderness. So having the church having faith and patience, which we can see again in Revelation 13:10 and elsewhere, we should have this in order to survive spiritually. Okay, we need strength from God. And how do we endure it? By patience. That's all part of His grace, charis. Okay. And wilderness, you can see that in Isaiah 4:3. It could pertain to God's refuge. Remember the voice from the wilderness. It's the refuge of John the Baptizer to prepare the way for Jesus Christ. It's the same imagery here. The wilderness is as a refuge to prepare the way as well for the church, for the people of God. To her place where she is nourished for a time, you see there, is a refuge, and it's still part of the trumpet, the announcement of God's will for His people. She's nourished for a time, and times enough a time. Again, Hebrew way of writing or foretelling, it's chiastic. It keeps on repeating, which I already alluded to last time, that 3.5 days equals 1,260 days, or roughly 3.5 years, which I believe was during the height of Nero's persecution of Christians as a result of the burning of roughly 70% of Rome. And he blamed it on the Christians. So they were persecuted for around 3.5 years. And we know what's the ending of that, what happened to Nero, which I'll be explaining later as well. So the saints during that time, or Christians, Jews and Gentiles, were encouraged to have faith and patience. Okay, strength and endurance amidst their troublesome time. 15, then from his mouth the serpent poured water, like a river after the woman, to sweep her away with the flood. Okay, what does water mean? To begin with, I've been following through this motif, the trumpets. And since this is the continuation of the trumpets, it's all about announcing God's judgment, divine intervention in response to the prayer of the saints, like the incense there, using the imagery of the temple. When will judgment happen? When will God intervene? Okay, because there were a lot of martyrs already as a result of the physical persecution against Christians. So write this down, Isaiah 59:19, and then Hosea 5:10. Again, Isaiah 59:19 and Hosea 5:10. Just to amplify that, although we have here the dragon and then the beast, okay, or dragon/serpent, they are also God's instruments. Remember, Job 1, the enemy can't do nothing if God doesn't permit it. So his hands are tied, so to speak, unless God allows it. And God allows the enemy and his cohorts vis-a-vis the beast. That's kingdoms, actually, earthly kingdoms, to exercise his divine judgment, primarily against Israel, his people. And then now, as the church, as we can read in Pauline epistles, the judgment begins with the people of God. Of course, those outside this sphere, the unbelievers, or what we call the worshippers of the beast, will be judged, but that will be secondary. Why? Because in the Old Testament, judgment means two things. It's twofold. It's positive for God's people. That means God intervenes, therefore God protects them and rescues them. But on the other hand, it's negative for those not on God's camp. Of course, that means condemnation, not vindication. So perhaps this is the first time you're going to be hearing this. To be honest, I got to be honest with you as I study the scriptures, that primarily when you see the word harlot, okay, the woman in scarlet, the great prostitute, don't go elsewhere. It talks about Israel. Primarily. Secondarily, well, you can pick and choose whatever fits that category at the moment. But as far as the Bible is concerned, you can write this down, please. Hosea 1:2. I'll just give you three references, but there are loads, believe me. That Israel indeed is the harlot, the great prostitute, the one wearing the scarlet robe. Jeremiah 3:1-3. And then Ezekiel 20:30. And there are lots aside from this. So when you read the harlot, the great prostitute in the Old Testament, that informs the imagery here in Revelation. It talks about the people of God because they apostatize. In a sense, they committed spiritual adultery. fornication against God. Why? Because Israel is God's bride, his wife. That's clear in the Old Testament. And the church is his bride. It says here in Revelation. You see there the connection. So you won't get lost. You won't be diverted if you will always refer the imageries here. If you have a concordance, you can see there when it mentions in Revelation, go to the Old Testament. I keep on saying this references primarily Isaiah, okay, Ezekiel, Daniel, and then Jeremiah, and then minor prophets, of course, the prophetic books in Hebrew manuscript, and the rest in the Torah, or we call that Pentateuch. So when we say river, okay, as if the here we can see that the water, like a river coming out from the serpent's mouth. Yes, this is totally devastating to God's people and the like, but God allows it. It is actually part of his will, as you can read in Isaiah 59:19, that God's judgment is flowing like a river. Is the same imagery in Isaiah 5:10. Just don't go elsewhere. God is sovereign in all, and his means may not be rational to us. It may sound very strange or even anti-God, but just bear with me for a moment because I'll unpack this. Well, actually, I've been unpacking this since last time and prior to that even. So to sweep her away with the flood, you call that persecution. That's why we have here times, and half a time during the time of Nero. Why? That's the immediate context. That's the concern of the first recipients of this epistle by John called Revelation in Asia Minor. But the earth came to help of the woman, and it opened its mouth and swallowed the river that the dragon had poured from his mouth. Therefore, it's the end of the persecution, and we already tackled that last time. And also, when we discuss about the seven churches, that the persecution to begin with wasn't universal during the Roman Empire. It were just pockets of persecution. But during the time of Nero, that's the height. Okay, 3.5 years. And also later I'll be another emperor, Roman emperor, comes after Nero. Not consecutively, but having that beastly image. So what comes to mind when you read this? The earth opening up and then swallowing something, and this time it's a river. Isn't it, what you call that? During the time of Moses, yeah, the Korah rebellion. Okay. So here. Oh, there you go. Okay. Well, you know the story. You can Google that anyway. I can look for that. Just bear with me. Remember when Korah rebelled against Moses and Aaron? So in Genesis 36, you can read that story. Jonah and his family and his cohorts were actually, did you get that? Genesis, how was it? Sorry. It's not Genesis. It's Exodus 6. Or rather, number 16. I thought I'd written this. There you go. Korah's rebellion, Numbers 15. So you can see there the earth opening up and swallowing up Korah's family, and it only shows that it's the end of rebellion. Okay, and this time, the end of God's judgment or persecution. 17. Then the dragon was angry with the woman. Okay, so we have here the enemy, Satan, and then persecuting the church, specifically there in Asia Minor, and went off to make war on the rest of her children, those who keep the commandments of God and hold the testimony of Jesus. When a Hebrew hears this, commandments of God, what comes to mind? The Torah, the Hebrew manuscript. But when we hear Jesus Christ, what comes to our mind? It's our New Testament. So it's just saying that we should uphold both as His church, as God's people, the Old Testament and the New Testament. Or you can zoom in. The Torah is still applicable today. I have no problem with that. But it doesn't only mean for them the 10 commandments. It's just our context. For them, the Torah is 613. The 10 is just the summary. And hold the testimony of Jesus, Jesus being the Messiah prophesied in the Old Testament, again in the prophetic books. Then the dragon took his stand on the sand of the seashore. That means the enemy is still allowed to go against God's people, His church. All right, let's now go to 13. I hope we still have time to reach 14, but if not, then that will be next time. Next episode. And I saw a beast rising out of the sea. This is the imagery for kingdoms, okay? Because we already discussed that last time when we say beast or horns or call that heads, that pertains to monarchy, kingdom, or empire. It talks about human authority, having authority over many peoples. So having 10 horns and 7 heads. So hence this time, I take this as the empires or powerful kingdoms, superpower during the time of Moses and then onwards up to the time of the kings, and then they are exiled to Babylon. Why? Since Revelation primarily is about God's people. In the Old Testament, that's Israel. New Testament, that's God's church, the Christian church. Therefore, these kingdoms should have direct consequence, control, effect, impact on Israel itself. Are you with me? So let's not go elsewhere. If we're gonna mention a kingdom or an entity authority that's got nothing to do with Israel per se, and then the Christian church, then it's a misfire. So what I can see here, you write this down, 7 heads, okay? Direct impact on Israel, Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, the Mede, Persia, Greece, and then Rome, the empire that's still in power during the time of the writing of Revelation, last part and part of the first century CE. All right. What about the 10 horns? Okay. Since the 7 are the kingdoms, the 10, I believe so, according to my study, are 10 kings or emperors. Again, having a direct impact on God's people, Israel and the church. So it talks about worldly kingdoms. Write this down, please. Ramses II, believed to be the emperor during Moses' time. Sennacherib, during the time of Isaiah, Jeremiah, King Hezekiah. Nebuchadnezzar, time of Daniel. Cyrus, a time of Ezra and Nehemiah, rebuilding of the temple. Cyrus the Great. Darius the First, okay, time of Daniel and also Ezra, Nehemiah. Artaxerxes the First, that's king, I believe, mentioned in the book of Esther. Antiochus the Fourth, that's during the when the exiles actually returned from Babylon to Jerusalem, rebuilt the temple, its walls, and trying to make their lives normal again. They were under the Grecian Empire, and the king over Judah during that time was Antiochus IV, and he was rude to not only to the Jews but Judaism itself. And in the time of Jesus Christ, it could either be Augustus Caesar, okay, in Rome, but primarily having a direct effect was King Herod Antipas, because he was the one who ordered the male infants to be killed to get rid of the prophesied Messiah. And of course, Nero, height of the Christian persecution for 3.5 years. And at the time of the writing of Revelation, there was no more temple, simply because of Emperor Vespasian. He flattened not just Jerusalem, but ordered his son to destroy, that's Tiberius, to destroy the temple. According to Jesus's prophecy, not one stone will be left on top of one another. So I hope that's sorted out already. Of course, you've heard different interpretation. It's my interpretation. It's up to you which makes more sense. And being Christocentric as well. So 10 diadems, it's a repeat of the 10 horns. It's meaning those in power, those having crown of authority. And on its heads were blasphemous names. Why? I'll just set you an example. Each of these king or emperor treats themselves as God. Not only that, the worst matter is they're even over the God of Israel, Yahweh Elohim. That's why it's blasphemous, taking the place of God. And I'll be expounding that later. That's what it means by being blasphemous, taking God's place. You have no right to do so, even though you're the most powerful king or person on earth. And the beast that I saw was like a leopard, and its feet were like a bear's, and its mouth was like a lion's mouth. So it's all a retrospect to Daniel 7:4-7. You know this already. The lion signifies Babylon, bear, having two bones there, Mede and Persia, and then leopard having four wings, the four generals of Alexander the Great. So it's just speaking about one thing, human authority over many peoples. All right. And the dragon gave it his power and his throne and great authority. Why? Because it is his vehicle. If God is using his people, the enemy is using his courts as well. And more often than not, people in power. Why? Because when you're in power, you'll get blind. You have the tendency to be megalomaniac, that you will take things for yourselves, even perhaps imagine that you're God or equal to God, like the enemy. Verse 3, one of its heads seemed to have received a death blow, but its mortal wound had been healed. Now, this is another fresh insight. Write this down. I can't see in the Bible that there's another healer. There's only one healer in scripture, and you call that Jehovah Rapha, the God who heals. Okay. At least as far as the Bible is concerned, don't think things outside of what the Bible says. What has transpired here, as recorded in scripture. So I take this as, who could this be? In great power, an emperor for that matter, or a king of a superpower, super kingdom, that almost died but was eventually healed. You know what? One of the citing for Jehovah Rapha in the Old Testament is in Daniel 4:34. Astonishingly, that gives us a clue who this world power is. Who's the emperor? Who? Nebuchadnezzar. And you can read that in Daniel 4:19, starting with 19, and the end is 34, God being the healer of Nebuchadnezzar. When he turned into beast, okay, this got and this informs us what does Revelation mean by the image of the beast, which I'll be expounding later. Hopefully we still have time. All right, mark of the beast, acting like a beast, so to speak. So I believe this speaks about Nebuchadnezzar going insane and acting like a beast, but God healed him, and in turn, he recognized God as the true God and only God, not himself. Do you get the point? And this makes more sense because it's a continuing motive here in chapters 13 and 14. In amazement, the whole earth followed the beast. What's the beast? It's authority, superpower, having control over many peoples in their empire, like the Babylonian Empire, Persian Empire, Roman Empire, having jurisdiction in many countries, in many languages, many races. For they worship the dragon. And what's worshiping the dragon means? It means you take yourself above God, like these horns. They treat themselves over God. Well, we can say, that's non-applicable to me. I recognize God, yes, But you know what? Another form of idolatry is creating God after your image and likeness. It's the reverse of creation. So as if you can manage the thought of God and you can get away with things, that's part of worshiping the dragon. Uh, Conducting yourselves not independent of God, being selfish for that matter, self-centered. For given its authority to the beast, the world powers, and they worship the beast. Of course, people, they're forced to literally worship the beast. Like remember Nebuchadnezzar building that statue made of gold to worship him. That's a continuing thing, the running motif all throughout superpowers. They worship the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast and who can fight against it?" So write this down, please. Isaiah 46:5. It means arrogance. Who is like the beast? It's the flip side of saying who is like God. That's the meaning of Micah. Remember last time? That's the meaning of Michael. That God is like no other, and these superpowers are treating themselves, following the enemy. It's megalomaniac, isn't it? Taking the place of God. Who is like them? Well, there are many like them. Who is like God? Absolutely one. He is all unique. So taking the place of God. Verse 5. The beast was given a mouth uttering haughty and blasphemous words. That's what it means. Making yourself equal to God or even over God. It was allowed to exercise authority for 42 months. Our retrospect again, a chiastic method. It keeps on repeating itself. 42 months, 1,260 days, 3.5 years. Okay. Same idea. Persecution of the Christians. It opened its mouth to utter blasphemies against God, blaspheming his name and his dwelling, that is, those who dwell in heaven. Yeah. Like what King Nebuchadnezzar did. But you know what the good news is? Even the head of gold, the highest amongst at least the ranks in the Daniel image there, was Nebuchadnezzar, but God turned him around. So no one is hopeless before God. He can do whatever he desires. He's all powerful. He's sovereign, everything. That is the essence, actually, the book of Revelation. Also, it was allowed to make war on the saints and to conquer them. Persecution. And almost at the end of Nero's reign, Nero, by the way, started to be a good emperor. He was just believed to have this sickness, mental sickness, which made him crazy and do crazy things. And one of that is the blaming of Christians for the almost annihilation of the whole Roman Empire due to fire. Was given authority over every tribe and people and language and nation. Verse 8. And that's the Roman Empire. Yeah. Conquering, ruling the then known world. So you have Rome, north, you have Europe up to England. Okay, that's why we have the Hadrian Wall here. And then westward to Spain. So you see there Mediterranean, and then eastward up to the corners of the Middle East, border of India, and then southward you have North Africa, and then other nations down there. And all the inhabitants of the earth will worship him. So when Nero says worship him as the emperor, you call that Caesarian cult. There's no other God except the emperor. There's no other Lord except the Caesar. And that was a law. Everyone whose name has not been written from the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb that was slaughtered, okay, will worship the beast, or will actually consider Pharaoh, Caesar, for this matter, above God. And for Christians, that was really the challenging moments of their lives, because how do you pay homage? How do you worship Caesar Nero? Well, you don't have to go to Rome. He's built out of statues of himself all over the empire. All you got to do is to burn incense before that statue, and then you're already free from obligation. So, but for faithful Christians, of course, they won't do that. They will only worship the Lord God, and that's Jesus Christ. So that's why they're persecuted. There were a lot of martyrs. So why do we have here the Book of Life? Another perhaps fresh idea for you. When you think about the Book of Life, it's actually what's biblical is that all our names are already written there. When? Before creation. From the foundation of the world. You can read that as well in Revelation 17:8. So what's my point here? The song, Is My Name Written There, I think is misleading, sort of, because all our names are there. It's just a matter of blotting it out. Remember when Moses prayed to God because of the stiff-necked Israel, their hearts are really hardened. They just continue to disobey God. And he said, blot out my name. He knows his theology. So please, when you think of the Book of Life, you thank God that your name is already there from the foundation of the world. It's not a matter of writing it. It's a matter of blotting it out, erasing it. If you don't have the white garment that is expounded also in this book, Revelation. Let anyone who has an ear listen. If you are to be taken captive, into captivity you go. If you kill with a sword you must be killed. So when the Bible says, let anyone who has an ear listen, that means it involves critical analysis. And that comes by the help of the Spirit. Why? Because we're reading here God's word. It's about spiritual matters, spiritually discerned. So we definitely need the guidance of the Spirit to interpret things. And this time, you can read Jeremiah 15, 2-4, continuation of divine judgment. It's part of God's way of disciplining his people first. That's in verse 10. Remember the twofold notion of judgment, positive, negative. This one, positive, if you are taken captive, into captivity you go. Persecuted Christians. Some of them were imprisoned. Some of them were just penalized, but others were killed. The second part, on the flip side, this talks about the one who initiates, who commanded the persecution of Christians. Nero, if you kill with the sword, you must be killed. It's believed to be the sword of Nero killing himself. So suicide because he was crazy and he was fearing for his life already. The Senate and his guards are plotting to kill him, so he'd rather kill himself in a theatrical way. How insane Nero was. Here is a call for the endurance and faith of the saints. Remember the two wings, endurance and faith. We still have 8 minutes. Then I saw another beast that rose out of the earth. It had two horns like a lamb, and it spoke like a dragon. I know you've heard a lot of interpretation about this, telling you otherwise, but my take on this is who is the recipient of that image that he should be worshipped as an emperor and God at the same time. No other than Emperor Domitian. Why do I say that it is Emperor Domitian or Caesar Domitian? Because he was the reigning emperor during the writing of Revelation. You can't go wrong. At the height of his persecution, he just followed through what Nero did for 3.5 years. And that persecution actually, well, it's so horrific that he almost wiped out the Christians there in Asia Minor. That's why they are called to have this endurance and faith. Why two horns? It's like the two wings. Remember last time that points to both physical and spiritual, and this time horn, since it means authority. So he's got authority physically as the emperor over all his jurisdiction, the Roman Empire, and then being a god, small g. So taking the spiritual rulership. Even the Jews were forced to worship him and no other. So it spoke like a dragon. It exercises all the authority of the first beast, Nero, on its behalf. And it makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast. That means worshiping the emperor and have no other gods besides him, whose mortal wound had been healed, pointing to Nebuchadnezzar building that statue, remember, in Daniel? It performs great signs, even making fire come down from heaven to earth in the sight of all, which reminds us of 1 Kings 18:36 to 39. Elijah praying for the fire to come down and consume the sacrifice there. So the emperor being a false god and also a false prophet for this matter, just to convince his subordinates, his citizens of, and also the slaves of the Roman Empire, to worship him alone. Deceives the inhabitants of the earth, telling them to make an image for the beast that had been wounded by the sword and yet lived. Retrospect to Nebuchadnezzar, treating himself as God, even over the God of Israel. 15. And it was allowed to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast could even speak and cause those who would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. Persecution. 16. It also causes all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, talking about the Roman Empire, to be marked on the right hand and on the forehead. Why? Again, I mentioned over and over again that seal of God is on the forehead. That's Ezekiel 3:7 and then 9:4. And this is the opposite, the mark of the beast. It's on the forehead. It's a mindset to treat the emperor because your life is at stake over God. And hand, like I said, all you got to do is to offer incense. Okay, to buy incense and then, or that incense stick and then light it up. So you have there the work, and of course the deeper implication of that is self, that you conduct yourself separate from God. So that's your mentality. Therefore, your action follows your decision. So that no one can buy or sell who does not have the mark. It's a law to worship Caesar. If you don't, then it's illegal. You'll be penalized. If not, you'll be imprisoned. Worse is death. That is the name of the beast or the number of its name. Okay, now this is the punchline. This calls for wisdom. Remember, let those who have ears listen, or eyes to see. We need the inspiration of the Spirit. Otherwise, we'll get lost. Let anyone with understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a person. Its number is 666. Okay. So it's good to end this one. We'll just discuss this next time. No, I'm just kidding. We still have 2 minutes. What comes to mind to a Hebrew listener, for that matter, listening to the Epistle of Revelation being read in the church in Asia Minor? Write this down. This is very surprising. You know that this number 666 reminds them of King Solomon. 1 Kings 10:14. I told you there will be fresh insights over and over again in this series called Revelation of Liberation. In 1 Kings 10:14, every year Solomon receives 666 measure of gold. That's where we got the number here, used by John to communicate a message. What's that? 666 means earthly wealth. Another thing, immediate context, during the time of the persecuted Christians in Asia Minor, when they compute the name of Nero, means 666. So the author here is talking about Nero, and then the one who followed through that persecution, and that was Domitian. Well, you can have other interpretation. You can relate it to a modern power now, or hierarchy, or church leadership. It's up to you. But what I'm saying is, this is the immediate audience, and you can't get lost by having this Hebrew thought that the book of Revelation is highly shaped by the Hebrew manuscript. Now, write this down. This is very important, and I'll end our discussion. When a Jew or a Hebrew hears number 6, it means incomplete. Yes, you know that. And in a sense, it's earth, because 7 pertains to heaven. And what is before 7? 6. It means what is under, what is the earth. That's the Hebrew psyche. Another thing, when they hear of number 6, it recalls the 6th-day creation. And also what's created on the 6th day. You have there, well, hang on to your chairs because I see a lot of connections here. It makes more sense. Beast and so when it says 666, it pertains to creation, creatures, and then compass. Why compass? So you have another tool to interpret 666. I will give you 3 C's. So 3 6, and then this time 3 C. So 1 C is creation, 6 days, and then 1 C is creatures that pertains to beasts and humankind created on the 6th day, and the 6th pertains to letter C, the last C, compass. Why? In Hebrew thought, creation has 6 dimensions. And what's that? North, east, west, south. All right. The earth got north, east, west, south. Mentions here as well in Revelation. 4 winds. And then it's got top and bottom. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Compass. Hang on to this imagery and this term because we're gonna use this to interpret the chapter 14.